Well, joining me from McEwan's Beach in Mackay is Rosemarie Haucke. Hello, Rosemarie. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Ken. Good to be here.
Now, Rosemarie, on average, it takes 6 to 8 weeks to sell a property in McEwan's Beach. But you found the right agent who sold it within 3 days. That agent was Ethan Laval from Mackay City Property. Out of all the agents that you could have dealt with in Mackay, why did you choose Ethan?
I chose Ethan based on what the neighbours had said regarding another property at the beach that he had sold. And there was a sign on the gate of that property, and I looked at it and I thought, yeah, that looks like a fairly good person to deal with, and got the phone number off that and rang him, and from there it went.
Over the last 12 months, there have been 5 sales within McEwan's Beach. Yours was one of them. Ethan also sold another property in Aura Street, which was a record price. In dealing with Ethan, over the last 12 months, he sold some 30 properties. So on paper, he sounds like the perfect agent. But when you meet him, you very quickly realise that he's quite young. In actual fact, he's 19 years of age. He's only been in the industry for 18 months. That question of, has this person had enough experience, must have propped up in your questioning of which agent to choose. Having now dealt with Ethan, if you were speaking to a potential vendor who's concerned about his age, what would you say to them?
From the very beginning, in the first conversation I had with Ethan, he was very professional, and it felt like he had been in the game for more than the time period that he had been. And he spoke with a very professional aspect. Then when I did a little bit of research, I found that he had a tremendous support team around him, and that if there were going to be any issues, they would be resolved. He had a lot of backup, so he could ask questions himself if he didn't know, because he just didn't have the experience or whatever it might be. But all round, he was just so professional, and the whole organisation was very professional. And I felt comfortable with him, so I felt like I was doing the right thing by going with him.
Yeah, because Ethan's family run Mackay City Property, so he's lived and breathed real estate his entire life. What type of things really stood out in the professionalism that you experienced working with Ethan?
I guess because I've dealt with a lot of young people in my life, I found that his attitude and his manner was of someone far beyond his years. He was just spoke like he'd been in the game for so long. It was just really good.
Now, Rosemarie, I've been through the experience of having to deal with my parents, the sale of my parents' property, which is in this case what you were going through. So you had your mother to deal with, plus you had family members. It's hard enough sometimes holding a Christmas lunch with your family, let alone trying to sell property. There would have been a lot of stress in the family, and so especially all the stress would have been on your shoulders. How did Ethan help you deal with that stress and help you communicate with your family the steps that needed to be taken?
That's where he was really good in letting me know ahead of time the things that I could expect to be coming up. He put me in touch with a legal team that were excellent as well. And a lot of stuff was done in email, and that was mainly because I'm on the run so much and stuff like that, but at least I had it in writing so that I could come back to it at any stage as well. So that was absolutely excellent. And just talking to him on the phone and bits and pieces, he probably calmed me down on more than a few occasions. So he was like, it's okay, it's going to be good, it'll be fine, and all of those sorts of things. So it was just good.
Agents are very attentive when they're trying to get your listing. And in some cases, my experience has been, as soon as they've got the listing, it's like they disappear into the woodwork. How did Ethan come across to you once the listing was signed? And did he keep you up to date? And was the communication process up to the standard that you were expecting?
I guess that's one of the things that I did. Like once he had the listing and stuff like that, you go into that mindset. Oh, I wonder if I'll hear from him again and what I'll hear and all of those sorts of things. But Ethan was one of those people that anything that happened, anything that moved, any conversation he had, anything that cropped up at all, he was in touch straight away, whether it be by text, whether it be by phone or email, he was in touch straight away. And that probably to me then settled me down a lot to confirm that I had gone with the right people, in that the response was very, very timely.
Now, in a process like this, if the property was sold in 3 days, which is a phenomenally short period, especially when you think on average to sell a property in McEwan Beach is normally 6 to 8 weeks. What do you think enabled Ethan to get such a great result so quickly?
He worked with the person who actually ended up buying, the buyer. He worked with them to ensure that they got the information as quickly as possible as well, so that they could either secure the deal, or if it was looking like it wasn't going to work through, then start to look outside that particular buyer as well.
Now, in a situation like this, you're selling your mum's property. It's not a place that you're actually living in. And then it comes time to, we've got a buyer, but we've got to go through an inspection process. And unfortunately, sometimes things come up. And I understand some things come up that involved some negotiation. And in some cases, the sale may have fallen through. How do you think Ethan helped keep the sale on track and help both you and the buyer achieve a win-win situation?
We had an initial conversation where the buyer had some questions that were probably a little bit more intimate with the property that I could perhaps discuss a little bit better with him than what Ethan would, not knowing the property. And they did that. And then there were some questions that came up that I felt were more Ethan's domain with regard to talking about pricing and things like that. So I just left that to Ethan, and he was, again, in contact with me within a minute of these phone calls and things like that, just to make sure that everything was going on track, and to double check with me what I had actually said, so that he didn't then go back to the buyer again with a different story. So we collaborated a heck of a lot just to make sure we had the right story. But after that initial conversation with the buyer, I then just left it all in Ethan's hands, and if there were any questions that came up, he just came back to me. I went back to him, he went back to the buyer. So I always worked through him, just so that it was all one page and didn't get sidetracked or confused or anything like that.
Now, you're having to deal with family members. Every time you take a phone call from Ethan, you then have to deal with your family members. How did he help you make that communication process with your family so that they felt confident the right decisions were being made?
Again, it came down to if there was anything that was more than just yes, no type answers or needed a little bit more explanation, he put that in writing for me so that I had it and I could flick that information off to the family members. And he worked with me time-wise as well, because obviously my brother, one's on a property, so he's not always around a phone, and the other one's working. So we had that timeline as well, but we made sure we stayed in touch with each other so that we knew when the next possible communication would need to be, and he was always available. He would always, if I rang him and he wasn't available, he would get back to me as soon as possible, which was nearly straight away anyway.
Now, there's going to be people who are watching this interview who are on the verge of choosing between Ethan and other agents in Mackay. If you were to speak to them directly, why would you recommend that they choose Ethan over the many other agents vying for their business?
With Ethan, I just was so comfortable with him and all the aspects that go around selling, which I thought I knew, but I didn't, obviously, because he just pointed out so much to me on the whole journey. And it was good to know that he was there for that reason. He was confident with it. And again, as I said, yes, he's young, but he had that energy of a young person as well, that vibrancy of that young person that worked, I believe it worked in our favour with the buyer as well as ourselves. And he's just got so much support around him. As you say, it's a family business, and that family is quite, I guess, if it gets to supporting each other and things like that. So in essence, he's got all the resources and tools and the personality to go with it. So there's really no reason why I can't think of any reason not to go with him.
Well, Rosemarie, thank you so much for your time, and I wish you and your family well as you move on. And thank you for sharing us your journey with Ethan Laval from Mackay City Property. Thank you very much. Bye for now.